let you go. There's no way. I'm already still burning. So hold me close. Now baby, I do what I'm told. Still learning to take my chances, to take my time, to keep on dancing, to walk that line, yeah. You got me shifting the paradigm. No longer wishing, you're my lucky strike. Love the way you ride. Look into my eyes, say you're ready to go. $1 million life, yeah. We could roll the dice. Act like you're surprised, but you already know. Oh yeah, got lucky overnight. Jackpot when I got the invite. Let me wrap my arms around you, 'cause I can't go home without you. And my heart just vibe with you, babe. Wanna go sky high with you, babe. Gotta bring you close to tell you that you're my lucky strike. And I got to tell you, if you didn't know, then I got to tell you that you're my lucky strike. And I got to tell you, if you didn't know, then I got to tell you that you're my lucky strike. Cooler than cold, I'm all in. So load up the dice, so heavy. The way that you roll, I'm falling. So I never fall. I'm ready to take my chances, to take my time, to keep on dancing, to walk that line, yeah. You got me shifting the paradigm. No longer wishing.
is the World Series of Poker. We had the World Series last July, just a month ago was the end of the main event or so. And we kind of talked about it a bit on a few episodes right in July as we were recording it, but we thought we'd top it off with a little one last conversation. We're going to review a couple of the hands that I played in the World Series of Poker main event. Oh boy, that is just so nice to be able to say that out loud. We're going to go over a couple of hands that I played in the World Series of Poker main event. So I think that is pretty exciting for me. Obviously, a big pivot point, a big bucket list item for me. And so I'm excited to be here talking with the Wrecking Crew about a couple hands that I played. And I think we now have our YouTube audience fully plugged in. I got to thank our co-host, our producing co-host this week, John Somsky, who's rocking the audio panel and keeping all the magic happening here. So thank you, John, for your efforts here. I know Chris Jones, who is our resident producing co-host, is traveling a bit, but he is here for the conversation as well. So I introduced the panel. I talked about what we're going to talk about. I mentioned how folks can sort of get in touch with us, and we've got our audio stuff all sorted out. So I guess let's just jump right into the conversation about the World Series of Poker. So I don't want this to be too heavy on strategy because we've got the forums edition where we really want to get into strategy. But I just want to talk about the World Series a bit, what it's like in Vegas, a couple hands that I played. And if anyone has any questions about the series or about the main event or about other bracelet events or whatever, feel free to just type that right into the YouTube chat and we'll answer it here in real time. So first of all, Keith, Rob, Chris, and John, who are joining me today in the booth, a couple of you had a chance to get down to Vegas this summer, and it was the first time that the World Series of Poker was on the Strip at Paris and Bally's as opposed to at the Rio. Keith and Rob, I know you had a chance to rub elbows with some of the other bracelet event players, the World Series of Poker players. Did either of you find that it was definitely a good thing to move over there? It was definitely a bad thing? Were there some huge advantages or disadvantages? Keith, what did you discover?
I loved it. It was definitely improvement. Last year at the Rio was my first experience there, and now this year was everybody's first experience at Paris Bally's, and this place was twice as good. There's a few hiccups and glitches, but for the most part, overall, it was just a wonderful experience.
Yeah, Rob, what about you?
I definitely like the venue there. I've been to Bally's a number of times in the last year. I played poker at the little poker room there, so it felt like coming home, whereas the Rio is kind of off of the beaten path. And it's kind of remote if you think about it. The only thing close to it is the Gold Coast, which is across the street. So it gives you so many more options for dining, for just hanging out with people and meeting in different spots and different locations, checking out other casinos. It's just a very centralized location. And I thought the venue itself, the ballrooms that they used were plenty big enough, just like the Rio. I mean, I think we had plenty of room there, and it was definitely a good experience, I thought.
Yeah, me too. And I know people were worried about the parking, but I didn't find that to be a trial. Chris, did you get any perspective on it?
Well, I was just going to say, like, I didn't get a chance to go this summer, so I didn't experience the new venue. But and I loved playing in the World Series at the Rio, but it was definitely had a hassle factor. It definitely meant spending more because I was always renting a car. I would never rent a car now.
Mm-hmm.
It meant having to find parking. It meant because like the other thing that I like to do is go play like a bracelet event and. I don't win them all, surprisingly. So then once I bust out, I like to be able to find, some other, and I think there's some really other great options on the Strip as well. And that makes them, either walkable or Uberable or liftable or whatever your preferred ride share is. And that just makes it, I think a lot more appealing to me.
Yeah, definitely. We didn't do a rec poker house this year because it was the first year it was on the strip and it was kind of unfamiliar to some people. But last year we did rent an Airbnb over in Paradise, and the Ubers were just driving a man to the poorhouse, but going back and forth all the time. And it is, I mean, I walked from the strip to the Rio and back a couple times. It's doable, but it's not pleasant. And I really did
Not
like
the
being
summer.
centrally.
Certainly
No,
not the summer.
exactly. And you got to go down like Mugger Alley on the other side of the bridge there and everything. Yeah. But being on the strip was great. And having all like Chris says, being able to sort of just walk over to another card room and get a game in easily was nice. And John, and, having all the different food options was really nice. I got to stay, I was down there for 2 out of 3 weeks basically. And I got to stay at Paris for a few days. I got to stay at Bally's for a few days, and I got to stay at the Flamingo for a few days. And I'm not going to give away all my secrets. Well, okay, I'll give away all my secrets. So the Flamingo is the nuts. I mean, it's an older hotel. It's not in as great shape necessarily, but the prices are redonkulous compared to basically anything else that you can find on the strip. Service is great. The location cannot be beat. So I mean, staying at Paris and Bally's is phenomenal because you just jump in an elevator and then boom, you're on the gaming floor. You don't even have to go outside. So that was really convenient. When I was playing on day one, I was like 8 minutes from my room. So I could go up, swap out my warm water bottle for a cold water bottle, use the washroom, stretch my legs and come back down. And it was really easy and convenient. But at the Flamingo, really, all I had to do was cross the street. It was amazing. You could just go right outside, cut through a little parking lot, and there's a crosswalk right there that you could go right across the street, and then boom, you're up in your room at the Flamingo. So other people that are there next year, they probably won't have the pleasure that I had of staying with Taylor Moss at the Flamingo. So I know you won't have as good a time as I did, but the experience was great. And I think I'll be staying at the Flamingo quite a bit. That's not my first day at the Flamingo, I have to say. It is a good time to be had. It's a great location. They're not paying me $1 to say it, but I would advise that. John, where do you stay when you're down there, or what's that making you think about? I see your eyes. You're excited. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Mm. Hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. Because it really is kind of all in that one spot. Um, so Keith, you were mentioning last year you went down and played at the Rio. That was the last year to do it at the Rio. Um, this year at Paris and Bally's was the first year at Paris and Bally's. And next year, I guess, will be the first year at the Horseshoe. So I'm going to have to get another mug to join my collection. And that's great. I've got room for one more mug, I think. I hope they don't move to a new World Series of Poker bracelet venue the next year, because I'm going to need to build a new shelf next to my mug cabinet to put some more mugs up there. Okay, enough goofing around. Let's talk about some poker hands here. So it's a really weird dynamic down there playing in the main event. And I think everybody is on, bracelet watch. Like, I think people that are playing in the World Series of Poker, a lot of us are not used to that kind of environment. And, busting in a bracelet event kind of carries some pain with it that normal poker tournaments might not have. I'll put this out to the group and to our YouTube chat as well. Like, have you felt that is the case as well? Is there something about the World Series of Poker. I mean, they've done a great job with their branding, I gotta say, because there's something special and magical about the World Series of Poker, where it just carries kind of all this credentialing import to the people that play in it. But I find that makes a really interesting dynamic on the tables, because people don't want to bust at an even higher level than they normally would. So I thought a little bit about how to adapt to that strategically. And the one thing I came up with was that there's basically two kinds of players down there. There's the ones that are going to overfold, and then there's the ones that know that people are going to overfold and they're not going to overfold. Rob, I saw you unmute. Did you have some experience with that, or do you have some? Did that trigger a thought?
Yeah, I don't know that busting a bracelet event is any more hard to do than it is any other tournament that you play. Obviously, you're paying more, you're investing more. There's a much bigger upside, so there's a little more excitement there. But I think if you play like it is more devastating to bust one of those tournaments than a normal tournament, then you're not doing it right. Because you're going to be more risk averse than you should be. And you should really treat it as if it's any other tournament that you're playing. I think for me, the main thing is the experience of, being in that room and playing against those other types of players that you don't find at your local card room. To me, that is the biggest part of the experience. And I'm not so concerned about, if I punted off my chips, I might be a little mad, but if I've made an all right play in my mind, my strategy was fine. I did what I needed to do and just got unlucky and busted. Well, there you go. At least you had the experience and the fun of playing in that environment.
Yep, couldn't agree more. And I think, as we pointed out on a previous episode, you and I don't know what's the word for this, but we're pocket eight buddies. We've both busted the main events with pocket eights, and we both feel just fine about it. It seems you got to bust. Everyone busts somehow. I feel great about the way I busted the main event with pocket eights. Chris?
Yeah, the pocket eights weren't a big deal. It was the hand that put me down to the level that the pocket eights were a natural shove. So there you have it.
Yeah.
I think some of the events feel, I think the main event in particular, it's a freeze out. It's really expensive. It's kind of a bucket list item for a lot of people. I think that carries a certain weight to it that, you really don't want to play differently, but it is already different. It's got such long levels and an immense structure that's sort of like something that's already different from what you're maybe used to. But then there is this sort of weight to it, like you're not going to get that many chances maybe, and even if you're going to play it every year, you're only going to get to play it once a year. So I think that one carries a different kind of weight, and you can take advantage of that with some players and whatever. But yeah, I think the rest of them, they carry some weight. And I agree, there's like this sense of excitement when you begin those tournaments. It's different than a lot of tournaments. I think that's the biggest difference that I feel.
I'm just chuckling because I hope our YouTube watchers can see John Somsky's name and title that he's put under his Zoom face right now. It's really good. John, did you have something on that point too?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I had a question for those of you who went this year. Every time I've gone, one of my favorite things is just walking into the Amazon room or the pavilion room as play is about getting started or underway, and you hear all of the chip stacks ruffling throughout all the thing, and that just kind of overwhelms everything as your background sound. Did it have that same feel? Because there's hundreds of tables there. Did it have that same feel in Bally's in Paris?
I think it did.
So.
It certainly, yeah. Keith, talk about it a little bit, because you're looking in. Is that your background right now, Keith? Is that this year or is that a previous year?
That's Paris Black.
That's Paris Black. Okay,
Yep.
So that's this past summer. So what's it like? Describe it to our audience when you walk in for the first time.
It's very similar to the way it was at the Rio. You have all those tables and all those people, and all those lines and people talking in those lines, and it's just it's a lot of fun. I mean, you don't mind waiting in line because you make a friend for a little while you're there because everybody wants to talk, you know. So
It's true.
and you know, if you go in there expecting, then you don't mind it. But yeah, just the atmosphere. You sit down, and you're in the middle of all those. I was kind of toward one edge of the room, so and I was back facing the wall, so I could look at the whole room for several levels. And yeah, it was great. It was just. But to answer your question, John, it had about the same atmosphere, I'd say.
John, did you have anything else? I see you're still unmuted, and we're
No,
all just
I'm
anxiously
just
hanging
afraid
on
of
every word.
muting myself right now.
Yeah,
That
okay,
I'll
good
forget
stuff.
and
One thing
keep
I
in mind.
forgot, I just thought to mention is one thing that's is really something is like you're sitting there playing poker with people you don't know, and then you look up and there's Eric Seidel walking by, or Daniel Negreanu or something, people you've only ever seen on TV or whatever. And yeah, it's just that's when the atmosphere really hits you. It's when you see one of those superstars just walk by like it's another guy in a poker tournament.
I remember the first year I went out to the World Series in 2012. I took pictures, and it was like an old iPhone 4 or something, not great pictures, but I take pictures of everyone I saw and write down all of the famous people I saw, from Barry Greenstein to some of our local people that I saw out there as well. And it was a lot of fun to be able to do that, and came up with a list of like 30 people.
Totally. That was one thing I really enjoyed about the tag team event. I think I mentioned this on an earlier show, is that a lot of the pros play at the tag team event, and it was a good field to play in. But normally when pros are playing, they're into the game, they're focused on their table. But in this one, they were splitting time with their partner. And so half the time they were standing in the aisles, railing other players, chatting. And so it was a very approachable sort of collegial vibe. Like, it was very easy to strike up a conversation with someone. People were introducing themselves a lot, and it was a real social occasion. So I hope they do that tag team event every year. I want to play in it every year. And even if I don't, if I'm in Las Vegas, I definitely want to come by and watch that tournament, because it's just so much fun. Chris?
Well, I just, as an observer of that, because I was following, because you were in it, it seems like that's a format that actually I hope the World Series plays with even more, because it just seemed to bring just so much kind of energy and new players to the game, and like these kind of sort of team dynamic. It became more of a social part of the game, which I think we're sometimes hoping to see a little bit. And I'd love to see them do some formats with the tag team where, maybe you're playing a mixed game kind of tag team, like a horse game with tag team. You could like have specialists coming in for each, I don't know, just like maybe different buy-in levels. I just hope they play with that a little, because it felt, I think everyone that I heard talking about that felt the way you were talking about it. Just this like sense that this was like the more kind of fun tournament that they had played all summer.
And I was lucky to have a great partner, George Sanford, who's one of our RecPoker members from going way back, Grandpa George. I think he even had to play Ace King once, but once he got over that, I think he had a really good time as well. And no one had to sit on anyone's lap at all. I know Chris and Taylor were worried about that originally, but no, it was very civilized. You just got to alternate seats, and and it was a really good time. Rob, did you have something there?
I was just going to say, we're talking about famous person hunting. When I went to the World Series main event in 2018, I had a few buddies there that were railing me. These were people that were in my home game that I won this on, and they were there. And one of them was just a celebrity hound. He was chasing around anybody he could find and trying to get selfies with these different people. And so we're in the Rio in one of the hallways there, and he sees Johnny Chan walking towards the back of the thing, and that's Johnny Chan, and he goes running down the hallway out the back door, and he comes back. I got a selfie with Johnny Chan. So Yes, there's a lot of people and they're usually very friendly. Most of the people that you've seen on TV and that you want to interact with, most of the time they're very friendly and willing to take that selfie with you because he got a heck of a lot of selfies that year.
Yeah, I've been really impressed, not just there, but generally just how generous and open and friendly the poker community has been. So I think if people are out there and you're starstruck, or you feel like, these people are living in a different world, they're really not. And if I'm sure that they really enjoy getting feedback and meeting fans as much as the Wrecking Crew members and I do. I got a couple people coming up to me when I was playing down there and said, "Hey, I just had to come by and say hello, and you gave me some great tips on the podcast, and you've made my poker journey more enjoyable." And like, man, are you kidding? You cannot top that. You cannot top that when it comes to just like validation and like the pleasure of what we're doing here at Rec Poker, touching people's lives and making them, making it easier for them to enjoy this wonderful game of poker that we all love so much. Like, so yeah, so I'd say tell people, don't be shy. When you're down there and you see somebody, maybe some of the real big names are a little jaded over time, but I assure you they're in the minority, and people like to hear it and get that kind of feedback. So when I played, we'll get into some hands, I guess. So when I played in my first bracelet event, it wasn't that long ago, but I was tight. I felt like this, oh my God, I'm playing in a World Series of Poker event. And I don't like doing things for the first time. I have a steeper learning curve than most people. I'm like way better at things the second time I do them. So the first time I was definitely nervous and played tight and probably overfolded and didn't maximize my EV. And then the second time I played, I felt a little looser, and it's like, oh, it's still just poker, and some of these players are really, really good, but a lot of them are just in my league, and it wasn't the end of the world. I felt pretty comfortable. This year I felt totally loose. Going down there this year, I played in the tag team. I played in the $600 deep stack bracelet event. I played in a $1,500 like super turbo bounty, which was I don't recommend playing that one the same week that you're playing the main event, because it's going to train your brain to make some really different decisions. Like, you cannot just sit around and wait for hands in the super turbo bounty event. So I love bounty events and I don't mind turbos either, but I think in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have played that as like part of my main event warm up. But I felt very comfortable, and it did just feel like playing poker. And even in the main event itself, I mean, even a few years ago, I would have told you that I wasn't even dreaming of playing the main event, because it was beyond the kind of thing that you could dream as a recreational poker player. It just never even occurred to me that I would play in it. But over the last couple of years, it's been something that I would like to do, and I would never spend $10,000 to enter a poker tournament, because that's insane. And we'll just leave it at that. But winning my way in and being able to play in it, it was something that I kind of expected to be really tight and kind of nervous about. But honestly, after the first few hands, I felt really relaxed. I knew I wasn't going to bluff a lot out of position. I wasn't going to try and play big pots out of position. I was going to try and stay out of the real savvy players' way and just take my time and get comfy. And I really did. Like, obviously I didn't want to bust, but I had a few goals going into it, and I'd love some feedback from you guys or folks in the chat as well on what your kind of goals might be if you entered into the main event, because everybody busts the main event. There's only one player who doesn't bust the main event every year, and they go home with somewhere between $8 and $10 million, depending on the year. But everyone else busts and they feel stupid about it. So I knew I was going to bust, but I didn't want to be, my first goal was just don't be the first person to bust in the tournament. I just don't want to be the first person to bust. And so I was, definitely you don't have that long to feel conservative, but at first I was like, I'm just not going to be the first person to bust. And then you hear those magical words, seat open. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, Chris.
Well, you already accomplished it when you started because you played day 1D, right? So
I did.
so
Yeah.
lots of people busted before you even saw a hand.
Yes, in the true sense of it, but nominally, we're all playing day 1 together, and I was just like, I didn't have the stopwatch out on days A through C, but that was literally, that was my first goal. Just don't be the first person to bust. And then I was just, I'm gonna try not to bust in the first level. I just don't want to bust in the first level because that's, listen, if you get dealt pocket aces and you shove them in pre-flop and you get called by some garbage like pocket fours, and they spike a 4, you see where I'm going with this, Chris. What are you gonna do? You played it right, they hit the set, you got your chips in good, and you're going home. I don't mind that at all, and I would have gladly taken that if that was how I busted in the first level. But that didn't come up, and I just didn't want to bust in the first level if I didn't have to get into a bad beat story like that. So then 2 hours in, the first level's done, everyone gets a break. I'm shooting back up to Bal. And that did kind of take a lot of the pressure off, even what little sort of pressure I was feeling at that point. That did kind of take the pressure off. And then my next goal was just, I wanted to make day 2. Lots of people bust on day 1, like a third of the entrants bust on day 1. A lot of people that are excellent poker players bust on day 1. So it's not something that you really get to control. I was kind of, to say it was a goal was more to say, I just hope I'm not one of the people that busts on day 1, despite doing everything right, as all sorts of people do who bust on day 1. So as it happens, I did not bust on day 1. I busted near the end of day 2. But certainly when I woke up on day 2, I just felt like, let's go. And that, like, it really is a poker tournament now. And if you bust on day 2, or you bust on day 3, or you bust early on day 4, like, you're equally likely to not make the money at that point. And you want to have as much time soaking it in as possible. But ultimately, I was comfortable with the way it all went. But it did create, so this is what I was talking about. So there's this interesting dynamic in play. And there was a spot on day 1, I'm guessing the second last level. So we've lost a few players at our table. There's a player 2 seats to my left who has been extremely active, like posting a straddle blind pre-flop, even though you can't. So he was just putting twice. It wasn't a straddle, but he was just blind putting 2 big blinds in, and just telling people that it was blind. He doesn't get to reopen the action or anything at the end. Like, that's his pre-flop, and so he wouldn't look at his cards. And then we'd get to the flop, and then he'd decide how he wanted to play. That didn't happen like a lot, but just to give you an example of the kind of experience that this guy was looking for. And he had been shoving quite a lot. He shoved very often, a couple times with perfectly legitimate, strong draws. And then a couple other times didn't get to show down, the other players folded, and I didn't get to see what he had. But extremely active player. 2 to my left, of course. So that kind of did also kind of tighten me up a little bit. And the player directly to my left was 3-betting every single open that I made. He was like out to get me. I think I mentioned on a previous show, I don't know if it's because I have the letters REC on my shirt, but there was he definitely felt like he was going to hold me accountable. At our table was a Rob Gardner, who's a great guy, YouTube streamer. We'll get him on the show soon. I got to spend some time hanging out with him that week as well. And as we're walking away on like second break or something, he's like, "Hey, so Jim, did you like piss in that guy's Cheerios or something?" I was like, okay, so it's not just me that thinks it. Anyway, he's not involved in the hand, but I had to tighten up a bit because I was just getting 3-bet all the time, and I didn't want to start getting into light 4-betting on day 1 of the main event, because I guess I was still feeling a little tight. I didn't want to just go shove it all in there with ace-4 of diamonds and hope for the best. But we get to this one hand. I've got ace-king offsuit, and there's this really weird 3-betting dynamic where, unless you're 3-betting with exactly aces or kings, you're kind of bluffing. Like, you're kind of hoping for a fold, because people are really only continuing with aces and kings, it felt like, or like exactly ace-king suited. Like, people are playing really overfolding to 3-bets. And so I'd noticed this, and I'd started really opening up my 3-betting range to include a lot of ace X and king X hands that if people are going to overfold, I mean, it almost, you don't want to start 3-betting your really strong value hands because then they're going to fold. And you do want to start 3-betting with hands that make it more likely that they're going to fold, more likely that they're going to have the kind of hand that they have to fold. So that would be hands that have aces or kings in them. If we can make them less likely by having an ace or a king ourselves, then that just seemed it was a good candidate. So we're in the spot where like I'm 3-betting with ace king, and I honestly don't know if I'm value betting or bluffing or like I don't. It's such a weird. The 3-betting scene is so weird down there. Anyway, so a player in middle position opens. I 3-bet. This wild and crazy character to my left calls, and the original 3-better calls. Sorry, the original opener calls. The flop is an above average flop for me. It comes 10 Jack Queen, making me the nut Broadway straight. I got the top end of Broadway. It's made. My hand can no longer improve. It's the nuts. I'm feeling pretty good. There are 2 diamonds on the board, but I have the king of diamonds in my hand. So I've got the king of diamonds, and I don't remember if it was the 10 and the jack or the 10 and the queen or the jack and the queen, but 2 of those were also diamonds. So you can imagine if I've got the king and 2 of those are on the board, then there's only so many diamond combos left for our opponents to have. They could have ace X, or they could have, 9-10 or 9 jack or something like that, or some just really random spazzy, 7-6 cold calling a 3-bet, whatever. But that was really the only thing I was worried about. And I was thinking about the size of my continuation bet, because I definitely wanted to charge the diamond draws, and I definitely wanted to get chips in here. And as I'm thinking about this, the player to my left, who is in the big blind, shoves. They just shove. And they have almost exactly the same stack as I do. I think I had at this point, I don't remember exactly what the levels were at. I should have looked at that. I do have that in my little notes here. But it was, I think we were something like 70 big blinds effective, and I had 3-bet, so it was a slightly large pot already, but this guy just makes this big over shove, too big for it to be like a normal play. The player to my right, the original raiser, folds, and I'm in this weird position where I've got the nuts, I've got an extremely wide and aggressive player shoving into me, and I'm obviously calling. But I just know that this guy's got 2 diamonds in his hand, and there's 2 diamonds on the board. And there's the thing about a straight that I learned from Chris Jones is that straights cannot improve. They don't. There are no redraws when you've got a straight. You've improved as much as you're going to improve. Whereas other hands, they can make flushes, they can make full houses. There's a lot of ways for other hands to improve to beat a straight. And it's the main freaking event. So people are going to make good decisions and get unlucky and go home. And I guess I'm putting this out there to the group here, and if folks in YouTube who are listening and watching along, I'd love to get your reaction to this, because I obviously called. It never really crossed my mind not to call, but it did cross my mind just to think and do a little math and be like, okay, so he's got 2 diamonds almost certainly. It doesn't make sense to do this with anything else. Maybe a set, and even a set has some redraws to a full house. So I don't love life when he's got a set either, but he's not doing this with nothing. So there's this, you're doing the math and you're thinking, okay, so there's somewhere between like a 25 and 33% chance that even though I've got the king of diamonds, there's a between a 1/4 and a 1/3% chance that I've got the nuts and I'm still going to lose this hand if I call, and this is going to be how I lose the main event. So I'll ask this group here. John, you've unmuted, so I'll start with you. In that kind of position, like, what are you thinking about, and what are the factors that we should be considering, or like what how would you feel in that spot?
Well, I was actually going to start with something a little bit different that is unique to the main event. It is one of the rare occasions that if you get stuck with a really bad table draw, which it sounds like you had, you can tighten up. And because you're going to get a redraw the next day, and you're only going to be starting at level 5. So, just waiting till day 2 is an option for the main event, more so than any other event because of its structure. It doesn't apply to most events. Having said that, I don't know that I am physically capable of folding the nuts when I know it is still the odds-on better hand. There are times where a draw has better odds than a made hand. But this isn't one of them. Right. So I would have a really hard time folding. There is a possibility you're up against the same hand too.
Mm-hmm. Yep, good point.
But those are the only two possibilities that I see. You're either up against the same hand or you're up against the flush draw. It's tough, but I don't think I'm capable of folding there.
Chris?
I think you're up against that, or you're up against a set too. Like I think tens make a ton of sense with this action to sort of cold call a 3-bet or jacks to make real sense. And I would not be surprised, based on the player you're describing, that they had something like ace of diamonds, jack X, something like that. Like, because you're describing a player that's been shoving a lot and shoving with sort of like blockers and big draws. So I wouldn't be surprised to see. But regardless, I think that straights are tricky animals. Straights are incredibly vulnerable, even though they're really strong. When a lot of money goes into the pot, when we have a straight and we have the nuts, we're obviously ahead, but we're gonna lose more often than if we have a different kind of holding. And so that's just kind of the nature of you're gonna have a lot of times in your poker life where you have the nut straight and the board pairs or the third club, diamond, heart, whatever comes, and you can't improve, so you're just done. But I think that's part. But against, whether the player has, let's say they had ace 10 of diamonds, or they've got jack jack or 10-10, whatever they've got, you have a pretty huge advantage over them. But you're only going to lose, I think in either case, around 30% of the time. Maybe it's even like 20. I don't know the exact, I'd have to look it up, but it's somewhere around, you're like a 70-30 favorite. And that's it's about as good as it gets. It can, obviously we have 80-20s, we can have better, but if I'm going to get all my chips into the main, I'd like that. So I'm, it's because with straights, that if somebody is doing this, they have outs probably.
Right.
It's unlikely they're doing this with like queen 9, right, or something like that.
Right. Oh, you'd love that though, wouldn't you? Not even this guy.
That would be pretty delayed. But then you could still come queen 9, right?
True.
You're right. So but it's unlikely that they're doing this with something that doesn't have outs here. So I'm but if we're gonna play these games, I think we have to get it in.
Yeah, if you want certainty, take up chess. Right? Like if you get aces in pre-flop, you're going to lose a portion of the time. And, poker is not a game to be played by scared money. We talked about this with Clayton Fletcher on the podcast a couple weeks ago. Same kind of thing. If you're not going to realize the small edges that you can stack occasionally playing poker, then you're going to lose. So you got to be able to take advantage of those. And this is a huge freaking edge. So I want to address a couple of comments in the chat here. So Eric Anderson, Eric Anderson is such a godsend to RecPoker. He is a prolific forum poster. He's got so much good information about the world of poker that he loves to share with people. I think one of these days we're going to get Eric on the Wrecking Crew. Here he is posting in here, and he says flush wins 36% of the time, and a set makes a full house 33% of the time. Yeah, and that's what I was thinking when I was in there. Eric, and then I had discounted some of the flush combos just because you could see a lot of the Broadway cards, but of course, if he still has 2 diamonds, it doesn't make any difference. He's still going to hit his flush the same percentage of the time, even though he's less likely to have those holdings. So that's the way I was thinking about it as well. About a third of the time here, I'm going to go home, and I don't want to go home. But again, it never occurred to me not to call, but I just thought it was a really interesting situation. And I think just like in a satellite tournament, you might fold pocket aces, the hand before the bubble bursts or something like that. I can imagine some world in which you might, in some like weird abstract clinical example that Chris Jones puts together for our monthly deep dive or something like that, a very academic situation. You might find a fold with anything that wasn't the nuts on the river, just because the risk rewards ratio didn't make it worth it.
Let me ask you this though, like, because you've already earlier today talked about how you didn't want to go out on the first hand. So what if this was the first hand? You're 300 blinds deep, and this player just open shoves on you, like. I'm asking based on your approach there. You're still, and let's say if you fold, you still have 280 big blinds.
Right.
Like, what's your approach?
No, I
then?
think I call happily, and it's the same as getting my aces in versus 4s pre-flop. But I can understand someone else who's less experienced, and it's very likely going to be the only time they play the main event, and like it's just. People can have priorities other than maximizing their EV, especially in a tournament like this. I think in my case, first hand, bring it on. And what a great story to be able to tell too, right? Like, oh, how'd you do in the main event? Oh, I busted on literally the first hand, flopping the nuts and getting it in good. That's going to be one that sticks with you for a while. That's got pocket 8s into aces beat, I think. Keith?
Yeah, just got to remind yourself, I came here to gamble. Just put that in your head and it'll be easier.
I don't come to gamble. I come to play poker. And but yeah, so I think that's but Chris, that's exactly the kind of spot I'm looking for. And folks in the chat, I see, John Lutzy saying sets should be scared of your straight too. Yeah, could be up against ace king as well. That's right. That was a great point that John made as well. Yeah, blockers aren't real. Yeah. Yeah, blockers, I think sometimes we just use blockers to like make ourselves feel better. That's been my take on a lot of this stuff so far. But yeah, so I could see it if it was the first hand. I could see maybe someone folding just to preserve their life to continue. I could see if it was on a bubble, if it was on a really important bubble like a satellite, where having extra chips didn't matter later. Even a typical money bubble, I think I'm still calling, even if it's the difference between $0 and $15,000, which is the main event bubble. The buy-in's 10K and the first payout's about 15,000. I think I still do it, but maybe on like a satellite, I would find a fold there, just because if I had enough chips left, I don't really need to win the hand to make it into the money on the satellite. So that's. And we try and find these examples of where we could make these ridiculous folds. It's only really ever on the bubble of a satellite. I think that's what we've learned as we've examined a lot of the stuff at RecPoker over the years. Otherwise, you should mostly just be playing good poker, making good poker decisions, and continuing. John Leslie says Sammy Farha won an all-in first hand of the main one year. I think he took second that year. Well, hey, good point. What can you do with that big stack now? there is some value to being a big stack at the table because people are overfolding in the main. If you are comfortable applying pressure, then you can find some good opportunities to chip up. That was one thing. I had gotten down a bit at the time that this hand took place, so it took me comfortably above average, but I wasn't like dominating the table or anything like that. I think there were a couple people at the table with more chips than me still, and I didn't get a lot of good spots to apply pressure, unfortunately. So I didn't really get to reap the benefit of that. But yeah, it was a very interesting situation, and I just thought it was worth talking about here. So he did end up having 2 diamonds at showdown. I don't even remember what they were. I think it was like Jack 7 or something like that. So it must have been 10 of diamonds, Jack of clubs, Queen of diamonds, or something like that. And he had just cold called this 3-bet out of the blinds with Jack 7 of diamonds, and then just shoved with it. And I do remember that the turn and the river both came hearts, and you see that flash of red, and it's just like, but no, they were both hearts, and yeah, I know, it was like, oh god. So that was a really interesting experience. Yeah, Chris.
Well, I mean, you got players cold calling your 3-bet with Jack 7 of diamonds. That's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like those kind of situations where we were talking about like a bad beats and downswings on a forum recently, and it's like you can tell yourself, oh no, you want them to be making those kind of mistakes, and no, it's good for you if players do that. It's like, yeah, 99 times out of 100, but I do not want to see that hand right now. Do not show me that hand. Rob?
One thing about we've been talking about in our book study is the types of events that draw bad players. Well, I shouldn't say bad players, but less seasoned players.
Yeah.
The main event is one of the biggest ones. So early on, you're going to be in a lot more situations against less studied players than you are as you get deeper and deeper. As you get deeper into any tournament, the competition becomes better and better and better because the lesser studied players have already busted out. So the variance at the beginning is also going to be a lot higher than it is as you get deeper into the tournament. So to get deeper into the tournament, you have to accept that variance early on. Otherwise, you're never going to get there. And you're going to be able to take advantage of people that are calling 3-bets with Jack 7 suited. So,
yep, it's true. And listen, aggression wins in poker tournaments. So you can't just sit around and try and call your way into making hands and getting paid, because it's not going to happen. Even in the most luxurious, deep, patient blind structure out there, you're not going to fold your way to the money. You can't fold your way to the money, and unless you're just going to get really lucky that day, and I don't know how you get to plan on that in advance. You gotta be the aggressive player sometimes. Otherwise you're just not going to get enough good hands to make it into the money. A good comment from Troy Chapman here saying, if they do call a 3-bet, what does the range look like? Jack 7 suited is probably not a normal part of that range. Is there ever a situation when we should be cold calling a 3-bet? Which is a great point. Just like I'm talking about here, you'd much rather be the player making the 3-bet than the player calling the 3-bet. Not only because of what it means for the actual hand that you have, but because of the range advantage that you then bring to future streets. Being able to play with an uncapped range versus a capped range helps a lot. And that's a lesson that I think even our serious, thoughtful recreational players on the Wrecking Crew and our premium members, we're still probably not 3-betting enough. And in certain spots, I mean, we should be 3-betting much more widely than we do, because players don't respond in an optimal way to it. And it creates circumstances where they will make mistakes. And poker is just about creating opportunities for your opponents to make more mistakes than you, or bigger mistakes than you. Great comment from Keith here. Set mining in the early huge stack levels you could cold call a 3-bet. Yeah, I think that's right. But that's about it. Or like super strong hands that you're trapping with, or if you feel like someone to your left is going to maybe put a cold 4-bet in or something like that, or the original raiser might do it, then I could see that kind of trappiness. But yeah, it's going to be very rare that it's not a pocket pair of some strength up to ace there. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I was going to go over another 3-betting hand, but I think we're already coming up on an hour, and maybe we should save this for the forums edition. Is there any other thoughts on this dynamic or on that kind of experience? Because so we'll talk a little bit more about 3-betting in a forums edition that'll come out in a few weeks, and we'll talk about a hand where I chose to take advantage of this. What's the word I'm looking for? This characteristic of the field to be over folding to 3-bets, and I think there's a lot of value to be had in making those King X, Ace X 3-bets just to get the folds when people are going to fold. Keith, do you have something?
Yeah,
Dynamic.
I think that probably the most important thing to take with you in a bucket list event of any sort, whether it's poker or anything, would be to make sure you have fun.
Yes.
That's rule number one. It's got to be
Yep.
fun.
Yep, that's right.
Folding
Rob-
big hands isn't fun.
No, it's true. It's true. Rob, we cut you off there a little. You're muted, but did you have something that you wanted to jump in with?
The word you're looking for is dynamic.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Okay, we got a question from Troy here. So how strong should your hand be to cold 4-bet along the same vein? It's a great question. And we've got a few minutes. We can talk about this. So personally speaking, cold 4-betting isn't something that anybody's going to be doing a lot. You should really be doing it based on what you have, the opponent. So if you have an opponent if you have one opponent who opens really wide, and then you have another opponent who 3-bets really wide, you can 4-bet with an ace blocker, and they will both fold a certain percentage of the time. And that can be a profitable 4-bet, even with a garbage hand that has an ace in it. Alex Fitzgerald did a whole bit on this several years ago, which I should review because it's really interesting math on it. But if you're holding an ace and they open wide enough and this other player 3-bets wide enough, you can get frisky with some ace X hands and make them cold 4-bets. Other than that, it's mostly aces and kings out of the players the pools that we're playing in. Chris, what's your experience with that?
Well, I was just going to say this is a pretty interesting spot, the one that we're talking about exactly here. Well, actually, it's not, because the player I'm thinking about would be the one who would be cold 4-betting. The one that cold called is the one we're talking about.
Yes, the wild, crazy player.
But if we kind of moved it over, right, where you had who you were saying had to tighten up because of the experience of the players on your left. So you've got a player who is tight, which gives them a range that's a little bit scary to 4-bet into because they're already tight, but they're also somebody who maybe we've seen play a little bit tighter and maybe can make folds. And then you have a wildly loose kind of Jack 7 type player who's made a 3-bet here. That's a pretty interesting spot. It's a lot like squeezing. It's just higher variance. It's much higher variance, but it can be very profitable if you can pull it off against the right players in the right circumstances. Because it's so many chips. It's like when you do this in the right spot, you can really print a lot of chips. Yep. You can also get yourself into a lot of trouble. But I mean, if we're 4-betting here, I think we have to be splitting up our range. Then we have to be splitting up between some really premium holdings, which we're 4-betting for value, and then finding the kind of hands that you're talking about that become our 4-bet bluffs. Those kind of ace 5s, ace deuces, those kinds of hands, and they can be really profitable 4-bets.
And Chris, in moments like this, I'm just going to put you on the spot a little because you're the brains of this operation. When ranges get super tight like that, it kind of promotes some hands that would, like, what am I trying to say? Some hands that might be like calls before now have to either be 3-bet full, like 4-bet bluffs, or fold. So like, is it even ace 5? Like, is it a hand like ace 10 or ace jack instead that you would have to fold, but now you're making it a 4-bet? Or is ace 5 just a better candidate and you would fold ace jack and ace 10, but you would 4-bet with ace 5? Because I feel like it has to have some ability to win when it doesn't get through. There's got to be some, it's not ace 7 offsuit, but what, like, do you have a calling range there? Like how do you do that?
I mean, so I would, first of all, I'd love to hear what other people think about this, but so to answer there's sort of two questions there. To answer your question, if I had ace jack or ace 5 suited, I would much rather cold 4-bet with ace 5, because ace jack, while it can sort of interfere with their ability to have some jacks, it's the kind of hand that's like, it's not going to be that ideal. Like ace 5 has a lot of opportunities and it's going to be sort of unencumbered. There's not going to be a lot of things if we're going to hit a really big hand with ace 5, our opponent isn't also going to hit a very big hand. And so that's a kind of hand that we can sort of get a little frisky with down the road. So I'd much rather sort of like have that bottom end of the cards in that kind of situation, because our opponent, who has 3-bet or opened, is going to have a pretty strong range. They're going to be really strong with Broadway cards. They're going to be really strong with high pairs. And so we're hoping for a fold. Don't get me wrong. We don't want to get into a war here, but if we do, I'd rather have a hand that's sort of like that. I know where I'm at with it. Like if we 4-bet with ace jack and it comes jack 7 5,
right.
Are we happy? I don't know, right?
Yeah.
So like that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. But to answer your other question, which I think is sort of the more interesting one, do we have a cold 3-bet, a cold 3-bet call range? I think we should. I do. I think we should, really think about what that looks like. To me, it depends on what kind of stacks we're talking about, what kind of positions we're in. So it's not always that we just do it with like jacks and 10s, but those are good candidates. But they're the kind of hands that, especially in a tournament like the main event, where we don't necessarily want to just 4-bet with 10s all the time, but they might be a little too strong to fold, especially against maybe a wild 3-better. And they're the kind of hands that can make some sense as cold 3-bets or cold call 3-bets.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And it is a very narrow range of hands. I don't know if this is true or not, but I don't like to have hands with 10s and jacks in them when I'm bluff raising, because the hands that I want my opponent to fold have 10s and jacks and 9s and stuff in them. And so I'm kind of like blocking them from having the hands that I want them to fold in this spot. And I'd rather have a hand that unblocked that. And as Eric says here in the chat, kind of getting to your point, Chris, with ace 5 suited, our nuts are unblocked. And sort of like what I was getting along there, you're not in that second best scenario. And I think in the example that Chris talked about, jack 7 5 boards, and you've got ace jack, if you called with ace jack suited, you're not really loving any one pair hand that you can make out of that. Top pair, top kicker, when they could have pocket queens, kings, or aces in their 3-betting range, isn't a comfortable position to be in. And you're really trying to make a hand that can beat one pair. Anytime you're in a spot like this, I'm going to harp on this a little bit, folks. Anytime you're in a spot like this and you're trying to either catch someone out by like putting a big hand on them that they don't expect, or you're 3-betting light for board coverage, like 7-5 suited or something like that, you really don't want to get married to one pair. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but you're going to lose a lot of money if you represent strength pre-flop, and then the strength that you carry through is just a weaker version of the strength that you were repping. So like a pair, making a pair with a 7 or a pair with a 5 or a pair with a jack is just not going to be a strong enough hand to beat your opponent's range that calls your raise and then puts chips in post flop. So you really need to be making a 2 pair or better hand. And since almost every hand in poker can make 2 pairs, so that's not really a good a good criteria. Making straights and flushes becomes really important, or making the best possible pair or the best possible kicker. You're still going to be behind that set of aces every once in a while, but the class of hands that you're behind is much smaller, and the class of hands that you actually dominate is much bigger in those kinds of spots. So do factor that in, and just remember not to get married to one pair. I go through my coaching clients. One of the things I do going through their database, we usually start with a database review just to get a sense of where the low-hanging fruit is and where they can improve immediately and get a real immediate return on their investment. A lot of players are losing players over the history of their game with one pair. You get to showdown with one pair. A lot of players are losing money in the long run getting to showdown with one pair. It's because they're playing one pair as a value hand. And a lot of times one pair is really a bluff catcher. So that's something you got to be thinking about when you're in these spots. And especially when you're representing strength. When you're representing strength and you're actually coming to the table with a weak one pair, you're not fooling anybody. You're just not showing up with you're bringing a knife to a gunfight. So, okay, I'll get off my one pair soapbox there, but be careful with one pair, folks. Okay, speaking about being careful, there's a forums edition coming out in a week or two where we talked about the theme of the month, which is blind versus blind, and we talked about it from the standpoint of our deep dive. And Chris Jones, who does this every month, has been talking about what the theme of the month is. We do a podcast episode, we do our play along seminar every month for our premium members. Daro Carney takes a look at a hand that some of our members made and gives us some feedback. And we were talking a lot about, in the small blind, the value of completing your small blind with a limp instead of raising. Listen to the episode. It's coming out next week, I think. There's a lot of really good stuff in there. But Joe Coolis, who was in our focus last week, reminded me that we should sort of make a note to our cash players that because rake exists, this is not a strategy that you should be employing in cash games. I play a lot of cash games. I don't really limp the small blind much as a rule. I hadn't quite thought about why I don't necessarily, but Keith will remember as well. Keith was there in that focus session. I don't know if Rob was as well. But Joe just made this really good point that because hands that don't get to the flop don't get raked, there's a huge benefit when you're playing cash to raising and taking the pot down pre-flop so that you don't have to pay the rake on that hand. So limping the small blind to open, when it's folded to you in the small blind, completing with a limp, often what's going to happen is you're going to go to a flop and that will end up being a raked hand. And you can avoid that by chopping, which is great if you're playing cash. Chopping moves the game along for everybody. And some folks might not want to do that because there's a bad beat jackpot or there's a high hand. And so people will want to play hands that could make the high hand. So I'll listen to the episode and you and your friends can decide on the etiquette of that. But I just wanted to reinforce to our listeners before you hear that episode, if you're listening to these in order, that particular episode is mostly talking about tournament poker when it comes to blind versus blind. And I'd encourage our listeners, if you're playing cash, to stick to the part of the episode where we talk about opening large sizes from the small blind and make that a much bigger part of your game, and probably fold a lot of the other stuff as well. All right, gang. What else should we talk about before we let this cast of characters hanging out in the YouTube chat head on out of here? I guess at the very least, we should talk to our producing co-host John Somsky about what's going on in home game land this week. John, what is new and exciting there?
Well, of course, we had our mixed game championship series, and none other than MN Ted won that event. That's his third mixed game victory this year.
He's on fire too.
Yeah. And then we also had our Tournament of Champions, and I thought it was very fitting that a really mad guy got his 10th victory for the August Tournament of Champions, or I mean for the July Tournament of Champions, given that he was on fire all through July.
Yeah, wow.
So I think that makes a lot of sense there.
A really mad guy coming through, continuing at the highest levels to bring
Right.
that A game.
This is his 10th victory, and I believe he just joined this year.
Yeah,
This is one of the most impressive months I can remember anybody having.
yeah, good
It's really,
point.
I mean, his name is like, I think it's like, I don't know, actually, we don't know who it is, right? So
No,
No,
I haven't
it's
maybe
heard.
private.
too. Could be,
Well,
but-
actually, his name is listed as Mad Guy. I have a
Mad Guy,
feeling
yeah,
that's
sure.
not.
Well, you never know. You never know.
Yeah,
But
You never know. Maybe it's
whoever
Dutch.
it
Is that
is,
Dutch? I think it's Dutch.
Could be. Whoever it is, it's very impressive.
Yeah, it really is. And just because we haven't interrupted John enough lately, I just want to mention before everyone tunes out that we are going to do our contest at the end of the show here. So we're giving away a copy of Dario Carney and Barry Carter's book, End Game Poker Strategy, the ICM book, which you will want if you are going to be making it deep in any kind of tournament. This is the kind of experience that you're going to want to be thinking about before you get to that final table. It's the subject of our book study right now. And anyone who is in our YouTube chat every week can win a copy for free just by typing the word food bank into the chat there. So if you're in our YouTube chat, just type the word food bank in, and we'll do our little die rolling magic later once John's finished with the home game results that we'll let him get back to right now.
All right. Then on August 8th, Poker Geek MN, John Somsky got his nightly victory for the year.
Way to go,
Poker
buddy.
Wannabe, Ron Payton got his
Nice.
second nightly victory for the year.
I haven't met
Graphics-
Ron, but he's a Canadian guy. I love that.
Graphics 16.
Graphics, Roger.
Well, it's private here listed.
Oh,
So
God! I just
remember-
doxed Roger Shooty. Oh God!
Yep.
Wait, no, we'll call him Roger S. No, that's too obvious. We'll call him R Shooty. Okay. There.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Graphic 16 got his fourth nightly victory for the year. Mudslinger 1942, Jack Peschel got his first nightly victory for the year.
Congrats, Jack.
Poker Geek MN, John Somsky got his sixth
What?
nightly
Whoa.
victory for the year.
Oh, 2 in a week.
That is
All
true.
right.
Well, and I want you to know that makes, for me, this year, 7 total victories. And if you remember, in the beginning of the year, I said, I think I'm half as good as,
Jacob Kiki.
yeah, as Kick Geek Jr. So,
Keck Geek 65 is private also, Jim. Come on.
Oh no, I'm doxing everybody.
anyway, so I thought that, I would make my goal for 10. Well, I've got 7 of them now, so there is a
You're right on
chance I will
track.
actually achieve this.
You're right on track. Congratulations, John. And then just because we're going to interrupt you 2 or 3 times, I think, today to make up for some lost time. And how great is that, Roger Shooty? So I don't know. I don't mention this enough, but Roger helps us put every single podcast together that we do behind the scenes. And he's really involved in the every step of the production. He's full of great ideas. He's got a big heart. He's also someone who really appreciates the plight of people suffering from food insecurity. I know he's doing all sorts of things in the world to make the poker world and the rest of the world a better place. So Roger Shooty, congratulations on your win, man. And thank you for everything you do here at RecPoker. Is really appreciated.
Then for our daily mixed event, Binkley, who's also private here, got the first
Private.
daily mixed event for the year.
So folks are going to have to go in and start entering their, first and last
some of
names,
these people
making it
have been
public.
so well known to them. I mean, come on.
I know.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's
Well,
funny.
it's because
That's funny.
I pulled out the back door that we had in there.
Yeah.
That way
I
people
know.
are in total control. And then
Well, here, if John says you're private, you got to go to your RecPoker profile and make your first and last name public so that we don't accidentally dox you, or I don't do it on purpose because we
Yeah.
don't need any. We don't need
Like
any
Eric,
lawsuits.
you mean? Like Eric
Yeah.
should go in there?
Yes, exactly.
And then we have Fergie 56, another
Oh my God.
private one.
No, I'm
What?
not doing it.
Come
I'm not
on.
saying it.
Got her first international victory for the year.
How do you know it's a her?
Or him. Although she does host an empowerment group for women
Yeah.
here, so
Well, I'm thinking anybody in the wrecking crew should not be private.
Yeah,
just
we
saying.
could start. They probably sign as part of their wrecking crew application process. I'm sure we own their image and the full
Yeah.
rights to do whatever we want with their material. Good point.
Then
Nicely done, Kim Kilroy.
Oslo Burger, Tron Vidar Stensby.
Oh, right
got
on.
his
Tron.
second international victory for the year.
Such a
And
cool
last
dude.
but not least, Shark Slayer 21, Lucky Hawes, won the Learn Pro Poker event.
Wow.
So he can, or she, because I don't know what gender Lucky is, maybe both, may contact Jim at rec.poker for 1 free month at Learn Pro Poker.
There you go. Lucky. I know Lucky a little because when he was a new member, there was some kerfuffle over some comments in the chat, and Lucky and I had to have a chat about sort of how we like to comport ourselves around here. And they've been great. They're really receptive, had a really good attitude about it. I was pleased that they're enjoying the home game so much, and it was only a matter of time. Lucky Haas, congratulations on your win, and good to see you still enjoying those home games. Way to go. And yeah, do email me. I know you've got my email address already, but just in case, it's jim@rec.poker, jim@rec.poker, and you will love your free month of learning material available for you at Learn Pro Poker. There's just a wealth of information there available to you. Well, thanks, John. And see what happens when you volunteer to be the producing co-host of the show for a week. Boom. Victories, not just one, but 2 victories in the same week. I think those things are related because the more you give, the more you get. That's kind of how it works here.
I just figured I need to have some wins to overset all of the fails that was about to happen.
That's right. It's all about balance. You're such a Zen. You look out, Rob. You got another Zen master coming for you here. I think John's mastering the balance. We got some fun comments here in the chat. I really appreciate the feedback from Troy and Eric and John and Martha and Josh. I always love this real-time interaction that we get from our listeners. So I'd encourage, again, folks, please go, if you're enjoying the podcast and you're free on Monday nights at 7:30 Eastern, just check us out on YouTube. Come to the YouTube channel. It's free. We often have a guest, and we'll talk to people that are extremely interesting in the world of poker, and you can win a contest and get something free. Tonight, I see we're going to start with Josh and work our way down from there. I think it sounds like Eric probably already has that copy, but all right, we're going to roll this one. It has been historically a 1. We're rolling a lot of 1s, but we're going to roll this one and we'll see who it is. We did not roll a 1. It is John Lutzy. There you go, John. Congratulations. You're going to get a kick out of this one. The End Game Poker Strategy, the ICM book by Dario Carney and Barry Carter. So, John, you know the drill. Send me an email, please, sir, jim@rec.poker, and I'll make sure you get an e-copy of that fantastic book. It's the one we're doing in our book study right now, and Rob and I were just talking about what the next book study might contain. It's a ways off, but we like to plan this a little bit in advance. So no plans right now, but keep your eyes peeled on the @RecPoker Twitter handle. We'll probably be doing something there to do a poll. We're going to talk to the one and only Mark Pershawn over at Website Amp and try and get a poll going on the website or something like that as well. Yeah, I guess that's really all we have to say about that at this point. Okay, anything else, gang? Should we let these brave poker fans get back to their families? All right, that sounds good. Well, again, I want to thank the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, and Website Amp, and Keith, and Rob, and Chris, and John, and all these amazing listeners and YouTube listeners. And support your local food bank. And we'll see you next week.